This is Forza Motorsport 2. We're here on Xbox 360. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. So what are we getting here? It's 720p. It's 60 FPS. And yeah, this is the second entry in the franchise that helped kick it off, and the first of the series to make its way onto the Xbox 360. So this features intense circuit-based racing as you aim to unlock new vehicles, new circuits, new locations, and enjoy the stunning improvements of the HD era of gaming. Really, that was a penalty? Come on. So this one obviously is quite a bit older if you are familiar with the Forza franchise. This is before the rewind system. That's right, it's the one that came after this one. And it really is quite interesting seeing how this series has evolved and how it continues to evolve over time, as I have been sitting here revisiting them in a kind of almost a little bit of a row and random out of place, kind of selection. But yeah, it genuinely is interesting to see how the technology changed and evolved over time. But the fact that this is like literally from the beginning of the 360 generation and you're hitting that 720 at 60 FPS for the time, that is really, really impressive. Nowadays, it's very, very jaggedy around the edges. I could tell like the grass quality and stuff is really minimal. There's like these jaggedy lines everywhere, and we don't have all the fine-tuned improvements of handling and stuff from the modern era, so I have to be a little bit more careful with my racing, because penalties and stuff matter a lot more too on this one. And yeah, at the same time, I am actually quite impressed for what this one had to offer at its, at the time it came out. It really is interesting, because you can put these games side by side, and they did come out relatively close together, but at the same time, the years of difference between each of the entries, you get to see such phenomenal improvements to the vehicles, to the maps, to the quality. But even then, looking back at this one, I mean, there's lots of fans in the crowd, there's trees in the backdrop, you got these, actually the clouds, like the clouded backdrop does hold up quite well, even though it is like a static image. But there's lots of stuff going on. It's not like a low quality experience. There's actually, for its time, it's actually filled with depth and things to see. It's really, really quite interesting. Especially, that was really bad. Especially when you compare it to, the game that came after, the game that came before, going from that original Xbox to the 360. This is actually just like a phenomenal jump in technology. I mean, you could really see how this franchise became such a big cutting-edge part of what Xbox had to offer. Like, it's just, it really, really is that good. Even all these years later, this racing game is still good to play. But let's jump on to the next track. So yeah, while speaking of innovations, it was interesting that the 360 wireless steering wheel was built alongside the release of this game, as steering wheels have become a little bit more common, but that one was a wireless wheel, which was kind of a, an exciting sort of thing for the era. At least I think that was pretty neat. And this one definitely had a lot of, and I don't personally love this aspect of it, like you have to unlock sort of tracks in that, which is hilarious because I wanted to show off more and more maps, but I don't have those available in Quick Play because you got to get certain levels. So we're kind of in the career mode. So the career mode was a bit more focused on, getting vehicles, improving, doing stuff. And it is interesting to see these older ones focus more on the element of like, kind of doing a career mode as opposed to just straight up kind of doing races. I love the accessibility of the modern Forza titles a lot more in that regard. But these ones are interesting because they actually have like proving tracks too, which are these like simple kind of levels in concept and design. I'll also mention one aspect of it that is a bit of an annoyance, I guess you would say, is the fact that this game does take quite a bit of time to load. I mean, a number of the earlier Forza titles, that is definitely something I don't really forget about these ones, is the fact that like the loading does actually take a while for you to actually get into that next race, which is kind of hilarious because I'm so used to it, you know, kind of being really snappy. But even then, if you go to something like 5, and I think even 6 to a degree, it does take a little bit for that quick race assets to kind of load up. But, you know, whatever the case, you are getting something that is technologically really, really impressive for that time. It would be very interesting to see this kind of being shown off on something more modern in regards to, like, you know, just seeing how it would load and the improvements and everything like that. But I mean, it doesn't really get better than the fact that this kind of maxed out essentially what the 360 could do for, you know, frames, for visual fidelity right off the bat. And yes, you know, 3 and 4 definitely did improve on the quality of the world and, you know, the content, everything like that, a lot more afterwards. Get some more achievements, yeah. But at the same time, it's kind of like it is interesting that there was that peak, and then we had to see them get more creative with that technology going forward. There certainly is some charm in these ones, though. It is so neat from a perspective of, like, having played a number of these so many years ago and then taking a look at them again now, because your mind honestly remembers the games and remembers these experiences a lot differently than what they actually look like. But, you know, just fluidity wise and stuff like that, this is perfect. Like, they really just they did it. They absolutely nailed it. That's why the Forza franchise is always such a technical kind of marvel for Xbox, is just the fact that it's always really, really pushing what can be done. And then I've also been taking a look at some of the, I don't know if you call it like a sister franchise or whatever, but, you know, you look at like something like PGR, and the more I play like the Motorsports and the Horizon titles, the more it kind of makes me feel like PGR did actually kind of have its own vibe. Like, I would say that PGR and Motorsport are, you know, quite similar, but I'd really say the PGR franchise kind of leaned into that, like, arcadey style of play a lot more than these ones. Like, this is actually serious racing. For sure. Definitely serious racing. And then Horizon's more fun, open racing. And then I would say, like, PGR is kind of this mix of, like, it leans more into the arcade while still being a bit serious. I don't know if you necessarily need PGR when you have Forza, especially considering how big this franchise has become, but yeah, I can definitely see why they kind of went almost hand in hand for so many years, as it just kind of, like, sort of worked. I don't know if I can have enough acceleration to actually even beat this car here. I think it's just kind of got me. The other funny thing is I have to be so careful, because I am just like, yeah, it's going to beat me because of the time penalty regardless. I'm just like, I am not used to racing like this. There's usually like that carefree element of, like, you know, kind of playing with the rewind system, and it just coddles me. Yeah, so missing those safety wheel constraints of, you know, being okay if I mess up. It definitely adds a little bit more of an intensity to your driving when, like, everything can go insanely wrong. On the flip side, I'd much prefer this franchise when you are able to, well, more easily explore and have fun with the content, see the different tracks and the stylings and everything like that. But hey, at least these practice race areas are somewhat varied, at least in the direction where you're going and what you're doing. Yeah, this is so strange to me, having to having to play in this particular way. It's very interesting. Oh, that is not good. That's a restart is what that is. Oh, and there's like a photo system, so you could do a photo at any point, which is kind of cool. And, you know, they do like a lot of post-processing stuff. Like, if you were to go into the cinematics and stuff like that, it pops it down to like 30 FPS, so they can, like, apply some more extra, like, effects and stuff like that. But hey, look, there's actually a variety of people too. Yeah, they did a good job with that. Also, a big part to kind of mention that I think is really quite interesting for the Forza series is just like, this one really got that whole multiplayer evolution kind of going on, if that makes sense. Like, they really expanded the territory for which the multiplayer was taken within this series. Like, it's something you just kind of take for granted, is that, you know, the Motorsport series has a lot of ways to kind of compete, whether you're doing, like, you know, just competing in competitive matches against others, but there's also fun, silly games and everything like that, game modes. This one really elevated the Motorsport franchise's multiplayer capabilities, just in terms of, like, sharing content and exploring multiplayer and doing, like, more higher tier competitive type things. It really was, just like most games of this time, that explosion into multiplayer connectivity. It's like, sure, you know, you've got all this intense single player stuff, and you got like a career that you're sort of working through and, you know, grinding to work up your cars. But on the flip side of that, there also was that element of, like, you know, let's play and compete against others and have some fun in these, you know, online servers. So it really, really is quite interesting, and it's almost a shame that it's not quite accessible to take a look at these ones. I do think the Horizon franchise sort of is better off in that regard, of being something that is licensing-wise available in the long run, because the differences in the areas are so neat. But it also is really interesting to take a look at this series, if we could, on more modern platforms, because it is utterly fascinating. Like, it just, you know, just to see the different versions kind of just being available, it would be a lot of fun to sit there and explore them and play them a little bit more. Like, sure, we have the older hardware, but it's a lot more fun to have something new. So yeah, it really was kind of interesting to take a look at this from the career standpoint. I put us into the trial mode, so we're able to kind of play like any sort of racetrack, but again, you can't compete against others, it's just sort of like practice runs. But I thought we definitely had to showcase the Maple area, because this is one of the coolest, I would say, you know, locales from like the Forza franchise, and the fact that it's just like kind of been missing in so many of the kind of recent ones is disappointing, because it's such a neat track. You know, the colorful trees showing off these different sort of designs, and just the design of it is a lot of fun to kind of drive along to. It really, really is quite an interesting and sophisticated sort of track, I would say, with good, like, definition levels. But you could definitely look in the backdrop and you could see, like, the 2D imagery, and even the trees and stuff like that being, like, very clearly 2D images. But it's the way they do the effects and stuff like that. Like, the road in that looks fantastic. The scratches of the car tires kind of screeching across the pavement, the detailed little things around the environment, you know, the walls, the borders, everything like that's really quite nice. Like, I actually really do think if you took a bit of a bump up for resolution scaling, you would actually have like a really, really clean looking racing game that's just very fluid and nice. Yeah, I do genuinely wish that we could still, you know, that we could see these on a modern platform for Xbox, and see the fidelity bumped up a little bit would be just absolutely lovely. Because it would just be neat from like a in time kind of standpoint. I'm sure there's not really like a care, and, you know, I'm sure licensing and everything like that would be an absolute nightmare to work out, but it really, really is quite an intriguing title. But I guess maybe just a time capsule for its time. But the Forza franchise will always be really, really fascinating to me, just the way it's kind of evolved. Like, even the car models and stuff look pretty good. But, you know, obviously, as time goes on, the car models become like even more and more detailed, and, you know, the track models become more detailed, and the backdrops become more realistic, and that tree's actually fully formed. It's funny that the other ones aren't. Like, I could just look at these trees, I can see that they're so obviously, like, so many of them just kind of flat images, like kind of almost like sprites, which is hilarious. And then we've got, you know, some of the RVs and stuff are fully formatted, but then other ones aren't, and it's the effect. That's what's always been really neat about gaming, actually, in general, as a total side note, is it's like, it's always the idea of trying to, for the technology we have, simulate a world that you can drive and explore in. And it tricks the user of its time, you know, of the time for the capability and quality and stuff like that, it tricks you of it being somewhere that's actually real. And, you know, obviously this... Wow, I really messed up there. Like, I was doing way better than my last race, too. I was really outbeating and outcompeting my Ghost model, but... You know, what I'm trying to say is, like, it's just, like, neat that, like, you can, you know, look back and be like, at the time, this was, like, really cutting edge, and it's neat to see all the tricks that they used to basically try to make you believe that this was a particularly real place, and they even do it today, and I'm sure stuff from now will look sillier down the road, but yeah, I like to look kind of at the techniques and stuff that they were doing, and just, like, comparing it to now and how they've evolved stuff, but, you know, like, the styling for trees and the environment has stayed very, very similar, even years on, but let's switch over to another track here. And I was kind of debating. I was like, did I want to do, like, Sebring, or did I want to do New York? And there's something about the New York track that's also just, like, really, really cool to me, because you get to see, like, oh, wow, that is a tight corner. Duh! You get to really see some cool, like, detailed environments, if that makes sense. Like, it's a lot tighter, but I've seen this area done with a lot more detail over time. Oh, there's Viva Pinata. But it's fun because they shove all of these advertisements into this. This is another aspect of why so many of these titles just, like, cannot be brought back. It's just, like, imagine trying to sit there and get the licensing and okay for all of this stuff. There's, like, Bosch, NGK, Subway, Casio. I think there's, like, a Toys R Us we drove by. Like, that would just be impossible. Especially for backwards compatibility. It's like, how do you... Because you can't go back and alter this stuff, right? So you gotta leave it as is. Nissan, like, would you be able to get all the okays for all of this stuff? Like, how would you do it? You'd almost be better remastering it. And then at that point, what's the point of remastering such an old Forza title? Yeah, that's the biggest question there, right? That is so funny. Because it's also, like, clearly you could see, like, you know, it just kind of goes endless in the backdrop. Like, there's not any buildings over there or anything. And even here, it's not detailed and stuff. And that is just really fascinating. But I think we got, yeah, there's like a big Toys R Us right there, a Foot Locker advertisement, Castrol, FedEx, all this stuff in here is kind of a little bit funny. You know, I'm actually getting quite a good chuckle at seeing all of that as we went by, because it's so detailed with so many different, like, kind of like advertisements. I don't really care too much about the driving. I'm more like looking at the ads and that, which is funny. Even that in itself is like a weird time capsule of the era. I really don't know how you'd go about it and just making it available, because I'm sure there's so many, like, legality things around making this available. Fuel your fantasies on the open roads of Forza. Well, it's not open, but the closed roads of Forza. I don't know, it's just kind of like a really kind of special sort of thing, and then just kind of taking a look at it again. It's so neat. Like, look at all the different things that you're just kind of like whipping by. But I think we do have time to actually sit there and go and take a look at Sebring, which I think would be a good idea. But I just want to do like a quick kind of like... That's a Sephora too? Really? Wow. Can't believe they squeezed that in. Did they have to, like, I'm assuming they had to get like the okay from all these companies to have like the logos and stuff in there. I doubt they were able to just like scan the environment. Like, look at that. That's like clearly the world just ends back there and it's 2D. But you don't care because you're just driving in this, you know, this fantasy that they've kind of created here. Virgin. This is just so neat to me. Retail space available, 360. There's McDonald's. Wow, what's that one? Fridays? Payless Shoe Store? Oh, geez, yeah, the copyright, Subaru, the copyright stuff on this would be just a nightmare. Could you imagine trying to work all of this out? Yeah, maybe Sebring will be forgotten. I'm just, yeah, we're forgetting Sebring. I'm so, like, locked into looking at the ads and stuff in this. This is so utterly fascinating to me in, like, every kind of way. Like, why would you even spend all this time detailing all of these? Did they pay for all these advertisements, or was it just like a realism kind of thing that they were pushing towards? That is so straight up bizarre. Anyways, it was neat to dive into Motorsport 2. It's been neat to see the overall franchise, and It's just really great games is basically the end point. Look at that destruction too. Wow.